And before this video begins, I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asban Team level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting their channel. So recently there's been a lot of talk about the future of Doctor Who, and I mean more talk than usual, since preaching doom and gloom is one of the Doctor Who fanbase's favourite pastimes. Recently, hackers managed to gain access to and release a whole terabyte of confidential internal Disney information, including their perception of Doctor Who as a brand. And this, combined with a recent Deadline article about Series 14 and its performance, has led to a lot of fans worrying about the show and what might happen going forward. As usual, I think a lot of this concern is unfounded, overblown, and lacking a lot of important context. So I wanted to break everything down and explore what's actually happening, what we know, and what might or might not happen going forward. And spoiler, no, the show isn't dead, and it's not going to be cancelled. So, let's start with that Disney leak, where a bunch of furry hackers breached Disney as payback for Club Penguin being shut down 7 years ago. No, I'm not joking, they actually said that. What a wonderful world we live in.
I hate everything! Club Penguin has been shut down!
Anyway, this leak exposed 1 terabyte of information from Disney's internal Slack communication server, and actually features a bit of information about Doctor Who. According to the Gallifrey-based user 12 Doctor Stan, base name there, Disney sees Doctor Who as a low-budget show. And this is actually a really good thing, because it suggests a very low risk, high reward potential for the show. It should go without saying, but when your show costs less, it has a lot less pressure to succeed. One of the highest budget Disney Plus shows of all time is Andor, clocking in at a whopping $250 million for its first 12 episode season. That's a lot of money, costing more than recent blockbuster movies like Dune Part 2, Godzilla x Kong, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So if a show that costs that much money flops, then it's drastically more likely to be cancelled or not get renewed than something like Doctor Who, for example, which has a fraction of the budget but retains a steady viewership. There were reports that Series 14 would cost something like £10 million per episode, but in January, showrunner Russell T Davies came out and shut those all down, suggesting that the budget is modest but lovely. And now this Disney leak seems to corroborate those claims of the budget increase not nearly being as drastic as a lot of those reports claimed. So for Disney to perceive Doctor Who as a low budget show is definitely a positive thing for the longevity of the show itself, because there is a lot less pressure on it to succeed and do huge numbers, because Disney wouldn't stand to lose too much for their investment, and it makes long-term plans more viable because of how safe the show is to produce. But this now brings me to the article released by Deadline on the 17th of July, which bemoaned the lack of Doctor Who presence at the Disney upfronts back in May, suggesting the corporate giant has little faith in the show. Honestly, this article is pretty much garbage all around. It's so awful and inaccurate on so many fronts. The article starts off with that claim regarding the upfronts and quotes one of many anonymous sources saying they feel like Doctor Who's future already hangs in the balance.
Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
It also erroneously perpetuates that 10 million per episode claim, which was already disputed by Davis 6 months earlier. Like I said, it's a very messy article and it's basically just like an opinion piece disguised as analytical and factual account of events. I mean, yeah, they keep referring to unnamed insiders with no actual indication of their reliability or needing to tell us how close they are to production, if they even exist at all, although for Deadline to do that would be pretty controversial. But really the bulk of this article is once again dedicated to that endless ratings discourse, continuing to prove that the only audiences in the entire world that actually care about TV ratings are Doctor Who fans and wrestling fans.
No Millie, no 900, no 800, 700K is here to stay.
The Deadline article throws a lot of scary, low, and seemingly disastrous numbers at you in its bid to tell you that Doctor Who Series 14 performed badly in terms of viewership. But once again, just like most of the ratings discourse, it doesn't look at the actual bigger picture and the context of those numbers in the first place. It's obviously very concerning when an article like this comes out and says how much of a drop Space Babies had from the 60th specials and The Woman Who Fell to Earth, but those are obviously not very comparable. The 60th specials and Church on Ruby Road were specials. Doctor Who specials have always tended to perform better than episodes in regular series, especially Christmas specials, because you have more of a captive audience and more people are watching because it's Christmas Day. And in terms of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, not only was that already an anomaly in terms of the modern show because it was one of the most watched episodes of all time, but it was also a big curiosity for a lot of fans because of the big casting change. Lastly, we can't forget this was 6 years ago now, when the TV and streaming landscape was vastly different, an industry-wide issue the Deadline article repeatedly chooses to just ignore to paint this picture of the show dying. When you see 73 Yards getting a chart position of 4.6 million, it might look disastrous because, you go back and you look at other things that have 8 million viewers in the past and you think, oh, the show's really declined. But then you look at the audience share and the chart position compared to the other episodes of TV shows in that week. And then you find out it actually did better than episodes like Blink, Utopia, Girl in the Fireplace, and Human Nature, amongst many others. These are episodes with almost double the outright viewers. But in terms of the actual performance relative to other shows that week, 73 Yards outperformed them, showing just how much the landscape has changed, and those upfront numbers don't tell the whole story anymore. But what about the rest of Series 14? Well, Space Babies had the next highest audience share of 32.4%, and a chart placement of 10th, meaning it outperformed episodes like Angels Take Manhattan, Wedding of River Song, and Power of Three. Again, these episodes have nearly double the upfront number of viewers, but Space Babies performed better in terms of those actually important metrics. And to really drive the point home, Silence in the Library is one of the most beloved episodes of the so-called golden era of Doctor Who, with 6.27 million viewers, but its audience share was a mere 27.7%, putting it below The Devil's Cord and on par with Boom and Dot and Bubble, with both those episodes actually having a higher chart placement. So you really can't put much stock into the upfront ratings anymore, because they're not reliable for the show's actual performance. And even going by the audience share, Rogue may be the lowest performing episode of New Who by that metric, but it still had a chart placement of 14th, the same as Dalek, in the same ballpark as School Reunion, Family of Blood, and Sound of Drums, so the show clearly is still in a healthy place, and is actually doing better than the 13th Doctor's era. Modern Doctor Who has never once dropped out of the top 50 of those audience charts, with Can You Hear Me the lowest performer at 35th in a week with The Six Nations, Call the Midwife, and a lot of soaps. The undeniable truth is that there's simply a lot more competition for TV nowadays, thanks to different streaming platforms, so viewership of traditional TV has been plummeting for many years now. So for Doctor Who to still be doing very well in such a landscape is a great sign. As the article itself admits, the BBC revealed that Doctor Who has so far been their top drama for under 35s this year, and the Whoniverse section on iPlayer has been streamed nearly 65 million times this year already. So there clearly isn't as much of an issue as a lot of fans and their Deadline article like to make it seem. The Deadline article generated a lot of discussion and got a lot of people talking, to the extent that even The Telegraph made an article about it to double down on the fear-mongering because, it's The Telegraph. However, right at the end of the article, the BBC responded to say that it's too early to be commenting on future deals and anything else is pure speculation. And they're right, it is. The BBC Disney co-production deal was for an initial 2 series, so the renewal isn't just reliant on Series 14. The performance of Series 15 will also play a big role in whether the deal continues onwards. Like I said before, Disney considers Doctor Who to be a low-budget series, so there's much less risk of the deal ending due to lower viewership, if there even is lower viewership, because they wouldn't be losing a significant amount of money. And the real most important thing I think everyone has been forgetting is that Doctor Who doesn't need Disney to exist. What we have here is a co-production deal. This means that Bad Wolf and the BBC are still producing the show, just with the extra financial backing and distribution courtesy of the mouse. So if Disney pulls out for whatever reason, Doctor Who isn't over or cancelled. Even Davis has said as much, outright stating that if Doctor Who ever lost the Disney deal, they just have to go back to making it on a BBC budget, like we've had for the last 20 or so years. The show has never needed a big fancy budget to survive. They could film it in a broom cupboard with 50p, a ping pong ball and a packet of quavers, and still get high viewership as long as the writing is good. Due to the co-production deal, we already have Series 15 locked in, having been filmed before most of Series 14 even came out. And for all we know, Series 16 has already been commissioned or will get commissioned within the next couple of months. Doctor Who is set to have a pretty solid presence at San Diego Comic-Con, most notably a joint panel with Star Trek, so it's possible that we might learn more about the future of Who during that weekend. And even outside of the main show, we have a spin-off all but confirmed, with the war between land and sea supposedly set to start filming this September, helping to further re-establish the Doctor Who brand and suggest a strong foundation to build upon in coming years. This next part is obviously speculation on my behalf, but in the BBC's response to the Deadline article, the quoted insider said the spin-offs are underway, rather than the spin-off. Now, I know Davis considers Tales of the TARDIS as a spin-off, but if we read between the lines of that quote, it seems to be that they're already producing multiple fully fledged spin-offs, and it should go without saying, but shows that don't perform well don't tend to get a spin-off for obvious reasons, let alone more than one. Doctor Who is definitely in a healthy and safe place right now. It has a marquee in-demand lead actor, the marketing has put it back on the map, and it definitely has had some success on Disney+, especially considering how difficult it has always been for Doctor Who to break into America. There are always a lot of heated discussions and discourse regarding ratings of Doctor Who. Like I said, the only people that actually care about that stuff are Doctor Who fans and wrestling fans, nobody else of any other show. But a lot of these discussions miss the very important context of modern viewing trends and the current media landscape we're within. By all metrics that actually matter, Series 14 performed well in the ratings, and the show has good potential for Series 15 and the spin-offs to also do well when they eventually arrive. The Disney deal may be huge for Doctor Who and the BBC, but for the rodent overlord itself, it's essentially pocket money, and it sounds like even they see the show as something they can easily renew since it's so affordable and cheap. But even if they don't renew Doctor Who as a Disney Plus streaming show, it will still exist, and it's not going to go anywhere. It has survived before Disney, and it will obviously survive after it. I know Doctor Who almost died during the Chibnall era, but that was mainly because of a lack of showrunner options, because nobody really wanted to take the job. Not that it was some crisis that was dying on the ratings and nobody was watching, it was mainly just because in terms of the actual creative side, they couldn't line anyone else up for it, so it was in murky water. But with the reliable stewardship of Russell T Davies, things look a lot more optimistic as the show increases its profile once more. So no, to answer the question, Doctor Who isn't dead. It's not dying, and it's not going to be cancelled anytime soon, no matter what you hear from random Twitter users or YouTube grifters. I might not be a huge fan of Series 14 on a writing level, but it definitely performed well and the future is looking brighter than it has in many years. So maybe we should focus on that rather than all the usual doom and gloom. And at the end of the day, it's not my job to pull ratings in, so if they mess it up, that's on them. Just saying. But that's all just my humble opinion. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez, my Diamond level patron, Glenna Clark, my Platinum level patrons, Matthew Burns and Maximilian Foreman, and all my Gold level patrons, Chris Douglas, Daniel Shillito, the 3 Railway Engines, and Tom Azar. Thank you so much for your support.